Story 1 by Reddit user Serenity Flower. This was earlier this year. Moved to a different town and was finally settled into my new place. It was the night before Christmas, and my family was coming by early that morning, so I spent the evening cleaning and prepping for the next day. All was well. I was in high spirits and crawled into bed. It was the first time I was hosting Christmas, so I was too anxious and giddy to sleep. I knew I should sleep soon, but I was wide awake. So I played on my phone a bit, just killing time. It was about 10 p.m. or so. Suddenly, I'm in a car with my husband on the highway, and he's pointing at something in the sky, frantically yelling, "What is that?" The next thing I know, I'm groggy and waking up, and there's lights around me, and a dark shadow. And it feels like there's fingers pressing my temples and something is on my head. I vividly remember that feeling of dread and thinking, "Oh no, not again." And I feel groggy, but manage to mumble and lift my arm, which was heavy, and try to say, "I'm awake." I just closed my eyes and wanted it to be over with. And I remember thinking, I hope this doesn't last long. Suddenly, there's blackness, and I snap awake. I'm drenched in sweat, and there are 2 points on my forehead that are throbbing in pain. I'm in my bedroom again with everything as I left it. TV on, phone in my hand, and I'm thinking it's been a weird dream. Suddenly, there's a loud noise, and the power shuts off, leaving me in the dark. It scared the shit out of me, and I jumped up and tried to wake my husband, who was dead asleep. Finally, after a few seconds, the power was back on, and my husband thinks I'm just being silly. The thing is, I understand it could very much have been a dream. That's not impossible. But I'm not much of a dreamer, and if I do, they aren't vivid at all. This one felt so real. But why? And why aliens of all things? I'm mostly into ghostly stories, so don't read or look up UFOs that much. And I remember the physical feeling of dread that it was happening again. I could feel my stomach drop and felt sick when I thought, not this again. But I don't recall any other dreams or experiences like this. It's so random. It was Christmas, so I definitely wasn't thinking about aliens. Before I continue to the next story, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you are, please show your appreciation by liking this video, leaving a comment letting me know what you thought about it, and subscribing to this channel if you don't already. Story 2 by Reddit user Sly Egg. Hello all. I'll start by saying I never really believed in cryptids, Bigfoot, etc. Aliens? Maybe. But I'm not sure if they have visited us. I am 22 and have lived in the suburbs most of my life. But the last 2 years I have lived with my girlfriend near some forested Michigan state land. Nothing weird. I've always loved the forest and nature. Deer, fox, coyotes, and all I have seen around here. They are always a welcome sight in their natural environment. Sometimes I have been scared by the occasional set of deer or coyote eyes illuminated by headlights. This was not that. I rolled into the set of houses that were surrounded by this land, around 11 at night. I see our neighbors all with their lights on, staring out of their windows and searching for something. Guessing it was a dog or something, I slowed down and began to pull into the long driveway. As I reached the foot of the driveway, I saw something I could not explain. It had legs like a deer, but much more muscular. But instead of the thin coat of a deer, it was a reddish-brown coat, much longer and comparing to that of a fox. Besides this, I move my eyes up the thing and see its face. It had a head covered in fur, but it was shaped like a human's head and had long, hunting dog-like ears. I saw no eyes and no mouth before it ran off next to a mailbox. The decorative top of this mailbox goes up to my shoulder, and it went up to the animal's back despite it being on all fours. I am 6'2", so it must have been over 5 feet tall at its back. As it ran off, it had no tail and looked incredibly skinny. And that was it for my sighting of whatever this was. For the next couple of days, I have assumed it was a mutated deer or something with mange. But ever since, the 3 nights after I saw it, I have not felt well. On the 3rd night since the encounter, I failed to fall asleep until the sun went up. With only a few hours of sleep, I felt terrible. Assuming a lack of sleep was to blame, I ignored my initial symptoms. After a night of sleep that lasted about 7 hours, I continued to have these symptoms as follows. Dizzy episodes lasting about 30 seconds that only happen when I purposely look for something. Keys, wallet, looking both ways across the street, and even looking for my phone when I know it is on the table beside me. Weird images in my head of accidents involving me. Fire from my phone being charged and the battery exploding. Getting hit by a car backing up in a parking lot. And much more I have forgotten since. Finally, I've been having the occasional nosebleed. I have only had one nosebleed before seeing this thing, and it was when I broke my nose as a kid. Now, I have had 2 incidences where my nose just begins gushing blood. I don't know what happened, but with today's recent nosebleed, I had to post something. The side effects are slightly wearing off, but not enough for me to consider things as back to normal. I'm assuming this is all just a lot of coincidence. Or at least I am hoping that's what it is. Has anyone ever seen a thing like this? Or is there any explanation for the sighting of this thing? Story 3. By Reddit user Illuminati_XOX. The writer of this story also goes by the online name of @ArielHunterts. I have some vivid memories as a child of seeing shadow people. And I also had an experience when I was 10 of a figure standing at the edge of my bed. It looked like a silhouette of my mother standing at the edge of my bed with her arms crossed. I called out, "Mum," and it morphed into a weird-looking creature with long arms and legs and a thin, elongated body that floated out through my ceiling. I couldn't see any eyes. It was totally black, and my room was dark, so I couldn't see any details. I was screaming, and my family came into my room that night and they told me it was just a nightmare. But I felt the presence of something in my room. I also used to see from the side of my eye in my childhood bedroom leading into the hallway of our home what appeared to be shadow figures standing and staring at me. They looked human, but would always have a male body type, always tall with wider shoulders. I never saw any that had a female body type, but this would happen literally almost daily for years. It stopped happening around the time I turned 12. They would slowly disappear as I would continue staring. It didn't frighten me because my parents kept telling me it was just my imagination, so I kept believing them. I thought this was just normal. As an adult, I know now that it's not normal. I also have always had very visceral, fearful reactions to pictures, videos, and other media of grey aliens. Even as a child, these images would scare me so badly, I wouldn't sleep some nights thinking about them. At my last apartment, I had the worst feeling I've had in a while. At night, I wouldn't be able to close my eyes to sleep because I felt like I was going to see an alien when I opened my eyes. There was a particular area where I felt I was going to see something. It was an area of my apartment that had a hallway that was at the end of my bedroom. I would keep my door open for my cats. I always had this nagging feeling like even when I closed the door to the hall, something was going to slam the door open and be there. I lived in multiple apartments. This was a more safe and upscale apartment compared to the others, and I have never had this feeling before anywhere else. I also live in a new place, and I'm getting similar feelings even though I'm not living alone for the first time in a while. A feeling that something is behind me, or something is watching me. My cats have also been acting very strange, and the person I live with has even mentioned it. They seem to stare into the darkness of this particular bedroom. They stop, stare, and run in the opposite direction. At one point, I saw both of them staring at the same time with their heads tilted like they were confused. They have never acted this way before, and I don't know why they are suddenly. I've always had strange bruises and scratches on my body that I can't remember getting for as long as I could remember. It got so bad, DCF got involved because my school counsellor was concerned. I have always made excuses to myself thinking, must have bumped myself, must have scratched myself, maybe my cat did it and I didn't realise. But it happens too frequently, and to this day I question what's going on. I was also unusually interested and drawn to the paranormal as a child. As soon as I could read, I was always going to the library and reading about the paranormal, and asking my family to buy books of real accounts of paranormal experiences. This started as soon as I was 5, according to my family. I'm talking giant 700-page books that I would read and feel drawn to. I feel like I was looking for information because of my experiences, or things I can't fully remember, and I was seeking answers. Story 4 by Reddit user Daniel HZ Music. Warning, this is a long story and a too long didn't read cannot properly express the complexities of the situation. A large part of this is therapy for me, so I prefer to share it in its entirety. To preface this, if there is some sort of explanation for this mysterious shadow, then please do share. I only saw it in a time span of 2 to 4 minutes at absolute max, yet this gives me the chills. This event takes place half my life ago when I was a teenager, but it still makes my hair stand when I deeply think about it. I have always been skeptical of the concept of ghosts and spirits. I doubt such things exist in the traditional sense at this point. I just don't know where else to post this. Also, a thing obviously relevant to this discussion will be that I would later on in life develop a psychotic disorder, bipolar 1 with psychotic features. I will explain later on why a psychotic hallucination would be so incredibly unlikely that I do not meaningfully consider it possible in this case. But anyway, to the story. We all know drugs can cause hallucinations, and I was a pothead when I was 14. Surely dangerous to the young teen's mind. Teens should all wait until adulthood. But the thing is, on this fateful day, me and my friends could not find any cannabis. I never saw anything like this before or after this event. I was going to the doctor at reasonable intervals at the time. I was considered a healthy teen, albeit a troubled one. I mention this as I feel it deserves consideration. As the night falls, me and my friends begin losing hope to find any weed. The local elementary school is typically empty at night and attached to a spacious park, so it is often a spot that bored teenagers go to hang out. We were disappointed in the inability to find any weed, but otherwise we were just chatting and trying to pass the time around the school at this point. I am by the playground facing the long side of a large metal crate that the school uses for the storage of its supplies. My friends and I are reasonably closer to the crate than I am, close enough to play a game of wall ball. I was a little further away, but only by a few yards or so. My friends are standing with their backs to the crate, facing me, and talking about the standard stuff our little social circle chats about. Girls, skateboarding, maybe some movies. We were largely bored still, but then this happens. I notice something, at first so seemingly ordinary. There is now a silhouette on that crate that I'm facing, simply walking to the right of the container from my perspective. Just a standard stride, like someone walking to someplace they are going. Not fast, not slow, just average. I notice within a couple of seconds it is actually a shadow. There are no features, it is only a black shade. I am guessing it is an instinctive reflex to look for the source of a human shadow when the source isn't obvious, but that is what I did. No alarm though. Might as well have been looking for my keys. But then I noticed something else. I cannot identify the source of the shadow. I look to the field on my right, and then to the overhang on my left. I cannot tell where this shadow is coming from. There is nobody but me and my friends. It is clearly not my friends making the shadow, as my friends are in their fixed position. You can see this shadow's shoes moving up and down as it steps. I become dumbfounded at this point. Truthfully, I thought it was likely some funky lighting and a person in a blind spot, but I was so in absolute awe of the sorcery. All I could say was, "What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck?" I was looking to my left and my right with the energy that felt a grand truth would unfold somewhere in those two directions. My friends did not at all realize what was going on. My eyes would regularly meet theirs and scan the environment, repeating the same words. What the fuck? That was the only time I have ever been rendered truly speechless. Everything else noteworthy in my life I've been able to at least articulate some sort of bullshit reaction. But not this. All I could express was that I was hellishly confused. Nothing more. Now the shadow only has so much room on this crate. It disappears when it reaches the end after about 20 or 30 seconds or so. Honestly, I cannot say for certain. Time felt like it was moving so slow. It simply walks to the edge and vanishes entirely. Simply nothing. Within a few seconds, the shadow is now facing the opposite direction and walking towards the other end of the crate. No urgency, but with the same directed stride. Not even with the hesitation of a person confused. The same confident and directed natural walk back and forth. After walking the length of the container, it vanishes at the leftmost end. A few seconds pass, and once more it appears to walk in the right direction of the container. All the while, I'm just saying the same variation of, "What the fuck?" My friends never even consider looking back. They believe I am tripping out on whatever I keep looking at. They never realize I am getting fixated on the crate with each passing glance to their direction. But finally, the shadow eventually walks towards the rightmost edge once more and vanishes permanently. After a minute or two from then, I am no longer stuck on stupid. I can explain what happened to my friends. I tell them about the shadow, how I could not see where it was coming from. We briefly take a view of the park from a few yards around us and see that no one could have possibly been there. One of my friends is pretty confident when he says it was probably himself that created it. I knew that wasn't true, but it was whatever at that point. We call it a night soon at that point. I don't know if my friends were even scared. They never seemed particularly spooked in that moment. Our agreement was that it was too late for us, so we went home. I wouldn't be surprised if they just thought I was lying. The next day, I decided to recreate the shadow in the same lighting. My friend was adamant it was him that made it. This was actually a bit of a big deal for me, a personal journey of sorts. I am sure almost everyone has these moments. They hear Mump in the night and they get a little rush of adrenaline. This shadow was legit scaring me at this point. I wanted to understand what happened. The first objective was to eliminate the possibility it was my friend's shadow, so I stood where he was. There wasn't even a portion of the shadow on the crate. There is a subtle burst of victory vibes because I know I'm correct about my friend not being able to make this thing from wherever he was standing. As I said earlier, I was skeptical of ghosts and spirits being real, but I was certainly willing to check. And of course I wanted to believe. So I begin the standard jackass ghost taunts you see in movies or whatever, like, "You spirits are afraid you won't show yourself." I was right in front of the crate, exactly where I had seen the shadow. I was standing in the middle, to be exact. The entire time looking like an idiot, and of course nothing shows up. The rushing feeling of conquering a piece of my fear dies down, and now I am a little disappointed. I still haven't recreated the shadow either. This shadow was actually more difficult to create than I realized. I keep getting closer to the crate, failing to recreate the shadow. Closer I get to the crate. More and more similar the shadow is becoming to something like what I saw. I am facing to the side, doing little strides of my own, just like the shadow was. Finally, I get something similar. But at this point, I am like right damn next to the crate. I start getting a bit unsettled because I still haven't made a shadow. It is almost there though. Only one piece of the shadow is missing. I can't see my shoes. So I get even closer. My body is bumping into the crate at this point. There is the shadow of my shoe. It dawns on me the only way I can make the shadow is by effectively covering up the shadow from my original vantage point. It is a difficult, if not impossible, of a shadow to see, to almost everyone except someone making the shadow. It was like the only person who could really see the shadow is the person who made it, but that was all I saw the night prior. Needless to say, I am spooked as fuck now, but I actually don't feel in danger. I don't feel anything but me, my shadow, the crate, and the empty school. I know something really weird happened there last night, though. This section will detail why it most likely isn't my bipolar. Now, of course, I would go in to develop bipolar 1 with psychosis in about 6 years from that age. Before then, I was never once in a mental hospital. I did get in some trouble, but I was never even in juvenile hall. Just petty hooliganism that resulted in tickets and classes. I have a clean record since turning 18, and I virtually never hallucinated prior to developing full bipolar. I might have seen a little shadow scurry by the peripheral of my vision for a split second from time to time, but those were rare. From my dialogues with one of my psychiatrists, she told me those are reasonably common among the general population. Sometimes I could get a little superstitious, but always within reasonable bounds. And I was still skeptical. I would always eventually ditch whatever minor superstition I humoured. Perhaps then the shadow was the onset of my psychotic symptoms, like a little glimpse into what would awaken later. I am rather confident this is not so. For starters, bipolar psychosis is very often less hallucination-packed than schizophrenia for a comparison. The biggest psychotic symptom in many bipolar psychotics is simply delusions and cognitive distortions. That is how it is for me. As far as psychotic symptoms go, I got it pretty light. My real torture is the mania, but this post isn't about detailing that experience. About 85 to 90% of my hallucinations occur when I am in some level of mania. And certainly, all of my most vivid hallucinations happen during the most intense manic psychosis. Most all of hallucinations I have are when I am at least somewhat manic, and are the common tiny sporadic variety hallucinations I described earlier, brief shadows for a split second. Also, like mistaking a voice when it is actually the wind. Seeing a person you recognize for a second when it is clearly not them at a closer glance. I have only had 2 manic psychotic episodes since when I first developed the condition too. Meds reliably keep me stable. Even in the depths of my manic psychosis, the way I hallucinate is rather reliable. The hallucinations are mostly spread upon a little visual, a little auditory, and the very rare feelings of touch. A deep dive into all of this is rather inconsequential to this particular scenario. Because interestingly enough, people with psychotic disorders have different relationships with hallucinations of different senses. A psychotic person can have heavy visual hallucinations with rare amounts of auditory. It is possible to only have heavy hallucinations regarding sense with no other senses being affected. It is also possible to have moderate hallucinations for a multitude of senses. It is highly variable. In this event, all that happened was I saw a shadow. I didn't hear it, didn't taste it, didn't feel it, and certainly didn't smell it. So, the question comes down to what are the lengths of my visual hallucinations? They are never as long as half a minute. Nearly all of them are for 1 to 5 seconds. 5 seconds is actually a long one. 8 seconds would be profoundly long. And the long ones are only when going absolutely wild in a mental hospital after a forcible admission level psychotic. Here are some examples. A common hallucination I had at the peak of my most manic psychotic were these little distorted spheres of the environment that I would see for about 2 to 3 seconds before they vanished. It basically looked like a floating baseball-sized super clean water droplet was bending light as you looked through it. It was far from the recurring demons some schizophrenics are plagued with. Another example is this one. It was when I first went manic psychotic. I was looking out a window at the neighbour's front door. Suddenly, a man popped into existence looking straight at me, from nobody being there to him standing. Then, just as fast, he suddenly disappears. He was there for a total of 2 seconds at max. It was unsettling, but it was brief, and I was already maniacally manic. The next one is the only hallucination I even had an interaction with. This was when I was manic psychotic the second time. I had the delusion that extraterrestrials were telepathically communicating with me, so I got the idea to wave at a random light in the sky with the idea it was aliens. As I waved, I saw the light move back and forth a couple of times in unison with my hand. It stopped after about 7 to 8 seconds or so. To be honest, this is the longest manic psychotic hallucination I recall ever having. Note, I never actually heard these extraterrestrials. It was just in my mind's narrative. It is a similar experience to if you imagine a movie scene in your mind. The difference was I believed those little movie scenes with my mind were real. As I said, delusions are the core piece of my psychotic experience, rather than outright hallucinations. I saw the shadow for a solid 2 to 4 minutes. I wasn't in a psychotic state. To have such an overwhelmingly powerful hallucination absent of full psychosis is an extreme outlier. I don't know if it is even possible. Who knows though? In this context, I consider drug-induced hallucinations to be a type of psychosis. But I wasn't intoxicated here, so visual illusions are more likely. But otherwise, I am goddamn stumped. There is something profound that happened that I truly do not understand. If anyone knows what would explain such an event, please share. There is a question that psychiatrists will ask patients with psychotic illnesses. It is something like, are you perceiving things that other people around you claim are not there? Even in the depths of my psychosis, the question has never quite applied to me. Because my hallucinations were predominantly mild and relatively far apart, my delusions were rooted in my thoughts primarily. Although I believed in objectively irrational absurd things, those things were not fundamentally based on objective hallucinations. My hallucinations were too subtle and rare to compel me to much at all. A mental health practitioner has never had to calm me from a hallucination. Paranoid delusions, yes. Manic irritability, yes. Just never about my hallucinations. So, in conclusion, unfortunately, I cannot prove this happened as my friends never turned around to look at the crate. And even if they did, it would have only been their testimony. This was also back when all the kids had begun getting cell phones, but the phones typically didn't have reliable video recording abilities. At least none of my friends' phones did. I'm sure my phone at the time couldn't either, and to be honest, I was too stupefied to think quick enough to try a still frame photo. There was terrible lighting too as it was night, so I'm not sure it would have worked. But I have now thought about this for 15 years now. Not in an obsessive way, but every couple of years the memory will come back to me. I will dig through my mind about it, spend a couple of weeks with it lingering in my mind. Tell it to a friend maybe, and then forget about it for another few years. Still get spooked out when I remember the night every time. For the longest time, I reasoned it was just an elaborate hallucination. It was only recently that I deeply dived into the patterns of my visual hallucinations and how my consciousness presents them to me. This had none of the patterns. It is totally reasonable if you just accept that this is an exceptionally odd, once-in-a-lifetime hallucination from me, and there was nothing paranormal about it. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But when I have been honest, and I know the way my mind plays games with me, it wasn't playing games that night. All I can do is promise you it is true. Hell, I'd probably be surprised if much people read this at all. It really is long, but if you did, thanks for hearing me out. I like going on walks these days. Sometimes I end up in the park that's attached to the school still, and I have seen the crate many times since, from a far distance, but for many years now. I avoid it because I'm an older dude now and I don't have a young family I look after to motivate me to go. The park nearby is fine though. I like the park. Fond memories there. Funnily enough though, for how unsettled the crate made me feel, I'm still not scared of that thing. Never saw the shadow again though. Thank you for watching and or listening to this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button, and if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video, let me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredeverall.com. I'm getting close to my next milestone of 100,000 subscribers to this channel, so I'm almost at my next major milestone. Thank you to everybody who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. Once I get to 100,000 subscribers, my plan is to reward you all with an epic video with over 3 hours of original content. If that is the sort of thing you want to hear, please keep helping this channel to grow. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can consider leaving me a tip for this video via my PayPal. Link is included in the description. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. Or head over to Audible where there is a book Punch by J.R. Park that I narrated. I get a small royalty if you decide to purchase that. Thanks again for watching.